Imagine this. All that you understand about the history of humanity, the emergence of agriculture, the origin of writing, the initial cities, is a falsehood designed to maintain your serenity. Now envision that the reality is much older, much more ominous, and much more vulnerable than anyone ventures to acknowledge. Because hidden under our planet is proof that humanity did not ascend just once. It ascended 7 times, and 6 times it was wiped out. The initial hint does not originate from myth or folklore. It emerges from the earth itself, and it comes as a caution. Suddenly, grand architecture materializes completely developed. No early models, no progression, no learning phase, just flawless engineering inserted into the chronology like a rock into still water. Ancient timetables forecast heavenly patterns with eerie precision. Massive stones align with constellations as if constructed by individuals who had observed the heavens for millennia. But based on the authorized narrative, these creators were scarcely beyond the Stone Age. That narrative fails to endure. Venture too near the boundaries of established history, and the foundation starts to crack. In the arid lands, remnants endure without any society to attribute them to. In the peaks, rocks are sliced with unattainable accuracy. Under the seas, metropolises rest organized in impeccable symmetry, and beneath strata of soil older than society, items surface that ought not to be present at all. Fragments of machinery encased in layers where solely nature should reside. Before we delve any further, I would appreciate knowing from where you are tuning in and what time accompanies you this evening. And as usual, the images you observe are merely aids for the mind's eye, not essentials for the voyage. Thank you for joining us in this. Now let us proceed onward. The further you descend, the more fierce the breaks turn. Scholars attempt to rationalize them, miscalculated, misconstrued, misunderstood. But the irregularities persist in arriving, and they all murmur the identical message. Something was present prior to the societies we recognize. Something potent, something structured, something that terminated suddenly and left scarcely anything except inquiries no one desires to resolve. What might obliterate a whole society so thoroughly that not even its title endures? Flames by themselves cannot achieve it. Deluges by themselves cannot achieve it. Frost cannot achieve it. Obscurity cannot achieve it. But a succession of all 4. A planetary reboot initiated by powers more ancient than humankind that can. It has occurred previously, not once, not twice, but 6 times. Envision for an instant that our planet is not a linear path, but a loop. Societies ascend, advance, prosper, then crumble so fiercely that recollection itself fragments. Those who survive disperse into woods, highlands, and caverns, bearing shards of wisdom they no longer comprehend. When the planet settles once more, their offspring construct anew, thinking they are the origin, when in reality, they are merely the consequence. Abruptly, the legends become logical. The deluge tales, the celestial fire tales, the nomadic survivors, the deities who impart to humanity abilities it should not yet have. These are not illusions. They are recollections of trauma transmitted from lips to lips over millennia. Reverberations of a realm vanished in a moment. If this holds true, then we reside in the 7th society. And the proof of the 6 preceding us still glimmers under seas, beneath deserts, within mountains, and even in our own genetic code. Proof that no authority or establishment wishes to expose, because the instant they do, the world will grasp the reality. We are not at the summit of human advancement. We are positioned on the debris of eras that ascended higher than we venture to envision. And if 6 realms collapsed before ours, the following inquiry is inevitable. Why did they collapse? And what lurks for us in the obscurity of the forthcoming loop? The further we gaze into the overlooked strata of our planet, the more something unforeseen starts to disclose itself. Not via myths or emblematic narratives, but via the persistent tangible proof that declines to align with the authorized chronology. When the ground is unearthed, and when antique rock yields to what should not exist there, the account we absorbed in education begins to seem agonizingly deficient. Every discipline commences with irregularities. Most irregularities are ultimately clarified, but a handful stay obstinate. A handful rest like jagged rocks in the seamless account of history, impossible to overlook and even tougher to rationalize away. These are the misplaced artifacts, the odd inventions interred in geological strata far more ancient than any recognized human creation. They are minor items at initial view, shards and metallic bits and processed surfaces. Yet each one murmurs a potential few dare to contemplate. Someone prior to us attained a degree of wisdom we presume is exclusive to the contemporary era. Consider, for example, the metallic blocks and mechanisms discovered sealed within antique rock. Some are unearthed in coal deposits, hundreds of millions of years ancient. Coal develops gradually under compression from vegetation that existed long before humans ever surfaced. And yet inside these deposits, laborers have extracted metallic items with level surfaces and processed borders. No natural power generates ideal symmetry. No geological compression shapes right angles. Someone crafted them. Then there are the instruments embedded in rock, hammers with iron tops of purity no smithy in the 19th century could accomplish. Discovered secured inside Cretaceous limestone. Brass vessels lodged in geodes that required millions of years to develop. Components resembling spark plugs confined in volcanic debris, hundreds of thousands of years more ancient than our kind. These are not mistakes in chronology. The encircling substance is dated by various unrelated approaches. The geological setting is evident. The items do not fit where they are located. Conventional interpretations propose pollution or deception. And occasionally pollution is genuine. But when the configuration recurs across landmasses and eras, when the metallurgical examination discloses alloys too sophisticated for their alleged age, and when complete documents disappear from communal archives, it grows hard to accept that chance explains all. A configuration starts to emerge, subtle but irrefutable. This configuration sharpens when we examine under the seas. Sonar data disclose impeccable straight grids submerged where no society should have existed. Divers uncover blocks assembled with accuracy, stone platforms organized in geometric designs, and passages sculpted as if by devices. Authorized declarations label these shapes natural, but nature does not sculpt 90-degree crossings over mile-wide bases. Nature does not form port barriers aligned to celestial indicators. The planet recalls in shards. A mechanism tooth here, a processed vessel there, a submerged staircase leading into gloom. They seem like leftovers from a realm wiped out. A realm that abandoned traces tiny enough to evade the disaster that demolished it, but resilient enough to persist tens of thousands or even millions of years. Yet the most challenging aspect of all this is not the artifacts. It is the response to them. Universities issue a short notice, then withdraw it. Museums keep the items in rear chambers without inventory numbers. Laboratories announce the specimen misplaced. Government bodies secure newly found locations behind controlled areas with rationales that do not correspond to the magnitude of the effort. The configuration of vanishing reflects the configuration of uncovering. This prompts a query many scholars dread to pose. Why would anyone seek to conceal proof of antique machinery? One response is mere inconvenience. These items endanger the acknowledged chronology, and establishments constructed around that chronology oppose alteration. Another response is more disturbing. If prior societies held machinery equal to or surpassing our own, and if their downfall was abrupt and complete, then our perception of steadiness is a delusion. What occurred to them could occur to us. That awareness is tougher to embrace than a misdated artifact. As we advance further into this inquiry, the query transitions from could antique societies have been sophisticated to how sophisticated were they? And more crucially, what annihilated them? In the forthcoming segment, we will investigate the notion that human history may not be straight at all, but recurring, molded by powers that ascend and descend over durations longer than any documented account. It is inside those immense extensions of vanished time that the proof of whole epochs may be concealing. Beneath the exterior of the known tale of humankind, there rests a chronology that declines to remain silent. It manifests in dispersed shards, in unexplained irregularities, and in recollections that surface across varied societies, as if transported from a solitary, overlooked origin. When observed collectively, these elements start to shape a configuration, one that implies society is not a gradual, steady ascent, but a recurring surge, an ascent, a descent, a quietness, and then an ascent once more. Our schoolbooks depict human advancement as a direct line starting around 12,000 years ago, with the initial metropolises, the initial regulations, the initial structured beliefs, the initial inscribed signs carved into clay and rock. But the planet itself is more ancient than all inscribed recollection, and it maintains a distinct type of archive. Ice cores, profound sea deposits, petrified pollen, antique coastlines, glacial markings, extinct stream networks, all murmur the same subdued potential. The planet may have sheltered not one, but numerous periods of intricacy long before ours. What renders this potential persuasive is the cadence discovered in nature. Earth is not fixed. It inclines. It sways. It inhales warmth and chill in loops. Ice layers advance forward and then withdraw. Sea heights drop and then rush upward again by hundreds of feet. Volcanic dust covers land masses. Comets disperse remnants across the heavens. Each time the world alters drastically, sufficient life restructures itself. Societies ascend on steady terrain, flourish for a period, and then crumble when the steadiness fractures. If there were vanished cultures prior to us, their remnants would not rest neatly on exposed plains awaiting uncovering. They would rest under seas where shorelines once were. They would be interred beneath strata of volcanic dust and compacted deposit. They would slumber beneath ice masses. They would conceal under deserts that were once verdant meadows. And in numerous locations, that is precisely what we discover. Geologists discuss sudden climate changes every 90 to 100,000 years. Biologists chart population constrictions that almost wiped out early humankind. Archaeologists silently recognize the odd voids in the advancement of tool crafting, farming, and building. One instant, our forebears are basic hunter-gatherers. The next instant, colossal structures materialize that demand mathematics, astronomy, and engineering wisdom far exceeding anything that should be present at the time. Some scholars suggest natural rationales for these advances. Others suggest that the chronology is merely deficient. But a third potential exists, one far tougher to face. What if prior societies attained degrees of wisdom and intricacy akin to ours, or maybe surpassing ours, and then were wiped out by worldwide turmoil so absolute that only shards remained? Shards too dispersed to reconstruct a narrative, but too tenacious to disregard. Narratives from antique cultures everywhere discuss great deluges, of gloom-enduring years, of metropolises engulfed by the ocean, of flames descending from the heavens, of survivors roaming into fresh territories bearing only recollection and shards of wisdom. These narratives are regarded as legend, but legend frequently develops from truth. When the identical narrative surfaces in hundreds of spots divided by seas and linguistic groups, it grows tougher to reject the common essence as chance. The further we journey into the overlooked chronology, the more another configuration surfaces. Society appears to ascend rapidly after each downfall, as if directed by persisting recollections or inherited urges. Abilities materialize completely developed. Mathematics reappears. Timetables harmonize with heavenly loops. Stone craftsmanship returns with an accuracy that amazes contemporary designers. It is as though humankind is not creating from nothingness, but rediscovering something it once understood thoroughly in another period. The notion of recurring societies is not pleasant. It situates our contemporary world into a much broader structure. It implies that the illuminations around us, the electronic webs, the motors, the orbiters, the delicate frameworks that sustain our communities together, may not be unmatched victories, but reverberations of accomplishments long interred, and reverberations diminish. If Earth has accommodated 6 societies before ours, then the query becomes inevitable. What caused each of them to conclude? Was it liquid? Was it flames? Was it chill? Was it something they released themselves? And more crucially, if we are the 7th, what powers are assembling around us now? Deeper inquiries await ahead. Proof of deluges that cleansed continents entirely. Dust strata from explosions that obscured the heavens. Abrupt freezes that rebooted whole ecosystems. And throughout all of it, the repeating recollection of something that preceded. Across every landmass and every enduring antique custom, there is a recollection that declines to diminish. Long before documented history, long before the ascent of realms and dominions, individuals discussed a period when the world altered abruptly and without compassion. They portrayed years when the sun faded, when the heavens assumed odd hues, when tempests arrived without alert, and when the seas ascended to devour everything known. These narratives should not be the same. They originate from societies separated by tongues, seas, and millennia. And yet, the particulars align with disturbing accuracy. In the uplands of Peru, myths remember a period of gloom so absolute that individuals could not view their own hands. In the arid regions of Australia, the most ancient verbal customs discuss a scorching precipitation that descended from the heavens. In Sumerian inscriptions, the world concludes in a deluge so enormous it wipes out metropolises. In the Pacific Isles, songs portray the sea ascending like a creature with its own will. Norse epics reflect a prolonged winter that seemed like demise itself. Even in the Americas, distant from the ancient world, narratives from antique clans portray a heaven that became the shade of metal and a tempest of dust that covered the planet. For centuries, academics labeled these stories metaphors, emblems, parables for ethical teachings. But geology narrates a distinct tale. Ice cores extracted from Antarctica and Greenland hold slender dark strata of dust at almost the identical depth, indicating a period when volcanic blasts covered the heavens. The weather changed in a geological moment. Temperatures dropped, illumination faded, harvests shriveled, species disappeared, and then, as if to intensify the ruin, glaciers crumbled, and seas surged upward with alarming velocity. The Younger Dryas occurrence, the Toba explosion, abrupt meltwater surges, impact winters. Each of these changes left their imprints in rock and deposit. They also left their mark in something far tougher to follow, human recollection. When societies that never encountered one another portray the identical disaster, when they discuss metropolises lost under the waves and a gloom that endured years, it grows difficult to reject all of it as fantasy. Something transpired, something worldwide, something potent enough to revise the exterior of the planet. The most chilling feature of these narratives is how abruptly the world appears to have altered. There is no gradual decline in the strata of deposit, no slow fading of plants or animals. Instead, there are sudden shifts. One stratum contains proof of a steady world. The next stratum holds indications of flames, deluge, chemical disparity, or disastrous cooling. It is as if the planet flipped a page in a moment and started a fresh section. In some narratives, survivors escape to the peaks. In others, they construct vessels. In many, they are directed by sounds or sights or recollections that seem older than they are. There is frequently a selected group, a remainder directed to safeguard wisdom for the world that will emerge after the gloom dissipates. Whether these stories are direct or emblematic, they disclose a common human urge, the perception that the conclusion of one period is the origin of another. More disturbing still are the portrayals of metropolises submerged under the ocean. Sanctuaries engulfed overnight, spires lost to waves higher than any known storm surge today, whole cultures vanished without a mark. For most of history, these reports were rejected as overstatement. But as sonar charting advances and divers plunge into greater depths, more constructions surface from the shadows. Stone bases, stairways, barriers, and geometric arrangements resting precisely where the ancient narratives said the seas devoured them. And there is another configuration concealed within these legends. They do not merely grieve the devastation. They suggest what was present before the disaster. Some discuss a period of radiance when wisdom was plentiful. Others discuss devices that buzzed like animate beings. A few portray metropolises that shone at night without flames. They murmur of a world more ancient than ours, a world that ascended to immense elevations before descending into quietness. These narratives do not confirm that antique societies were sophisticated, but they do confirm that ancient individuals were attempting to recall something they thought was genuine. They transported shards of recollection across millennia through melodies, engravings, and ceremonies. Even as the particulars altered, the essence stayed whole, a deluge that remolded the world. A gloom that endured years, and the conviction that something remarkable was present before it. If humankind had endured such occurrences once, it might merely be legend. But if the planet has traversed multiple loops of flames and deluge, if each loop reboots the world, then the narratives start to appear less like fantasy and more like cautions inscribed in the only tongue that could endure the descent. Ahead rests a deeper query. If these deluges and dust clouds wiped out prior societies, what tangible remnants of those realms might still rest concealed under the seas? And more crucially, who or what exerted such efforts to guarantee those remnants stayed interred? If the immense deluges and dust clouds were potent enough to sweep whole societies from the exterior of the planet, then the primary location we should anticipate to discover their leftovers is not on terrain, but under the seas. Shorelines have altered dramatically over the last 100,000 years. Whole continental ledges that once contained streams, valleys, and metropolises now rest under hundreds of feet of liquid. And when we ultimately gaze down into those submerged realms, what we discover does not mimic nature at all. Across the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and the dispersed island chains between Asia and Australia, there are constructions that challenge geological rationale. They ascend from the ocean floor like the phantoms of overlooked metropolises, platforms sliced with straight edges, stone pieces assembled so accurately that a blade cannot slip between them, stairways that descend into greater obscurity, level squares that extend broader than contemporary urban avenues. All of it positioned in spots that were once arid terrain during the last glacial period. One of the most notable instances rests off the shore of Japan near Yonaguni Island. At initial view, it seems to be a fallen sandstone shape. But when divers follow its corners, something else becomes apparent. Nature does not sculpt balanced platforms. Nature does not produce collections of parallel stairs ascending with calculated accuracy. And nature certainly does not yield a pyramid-formed base impeccably aligned to the primary directions. The further divers descend, the more the construction acts like building. Broad avenues, sculpted runoff passages, enormous supporting barriers, characteristics that signify planning, engineering, and intent. Across the Indian Ocean, another location casts an even lengthier shadow. Dwarka, the submerged metropolis portrayed in antique Sanskrit writings. For generations, its presence was rejected as folklore. Yet when sonar groups scanned the waters near Gujarat's shore, they uncovered a network of barriers and bases 5 miles broad. Sculpted stone pillars rest toppled across the ocean bed. Carved relics lie half interred in sediment. And most notable of all, the symmetry of the metropolis matches portrayals inscribed thousands of years ago. Ancient authors discussed a harbor metropolis of unmatched splendor that disappeared under the ocean in a single evening. It was not a figure of speech. It was a recollection. Even farther south on the immense Sunda ledge, Sonar scans disclose straight passages and rectangular hollows too impeccable to be natural. Many of these characteristics rest between Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, in waters that would have been productive terrain for early societies before the thawing of the last ice age. Scholars have recognized what seem to be pathways, port basins, and bases large enough to sustain grand building. Yet, these constructions are seldom addressed in conventional archaeology. Most are marked geological peculiarities or simply overlooked. The configuration does not conclude there. Off the shore of Cuba, deep ocean scanners identified enormous stone pieces organized in designs resembling urban avenues. Near the Bahamas, the Bimini Road stays the topic of discussion. Its rocks too consistent and too intentionally positioned for erosion alone. And along many continental ledges worldwide, fishermen sometimes retrieve sculpted stone shards in their meshes. Solitary leftovers of constructions long since submerged. What renders all of this more persuasive is how closely the positions match the deluge narratives from dozens of societies. Indigenous Australians discuss coastal territories engulfed by ascending seas. Polynesian sailors recount island groups that disappeared under waves. Indigenous communities of Southeast Asia narrate journeys inland after the sea ascended higher than any forebear had witnessed. These narratives are not figurative creation. They are historical recollection, extended across millennia. But the most fascinating query is not how these metropolises were constructed. It is why they were overlooked. If such locations existed, if they signified genuine cultures with genuine engineering ability, why did every remnant of them disappear with such thoroughness? A metropolis can flood, but wisdom does not vanish so readily, unless something more potent than ascending liquid wiped it out. Something that aimed not just at constructions, but whole systems of culture, tongue, and continuity. Something that compelled humankind to start anew from the remnants, deprived of recollection. Another disturbing configuration surfaces when inspecting how countries react to these locations. Areas with the most promising submerged remnants often become abruptly limited. Diving areas shut without rationale. Research authorizations remain unresponded. Sonar information vanishes behind authority barriers. The justification differs. Ecological safeguard, maritime security, military supervision, but the outcome is identical. The further a location seems to contest accepted history, the less reachable it becomes. These submerged realms do not simply suggest lost societies. They contest the basis of the chronology itself. If these metropolises existed prior to the last immense deluges, if they were built before the world submerged its shorelines, then human society is not 12,000 years ancient. It is far more ancient, staggered across multiple ascents and collapses like footprints fading into the depths. And yet, there is another stratum to this enigma. Not everything lost to the ocean remained lost. Some remnants of these antique cultures did not vanish into the void. They endured not in rock or metal, but in the physiques of the offspring who evaded the deluges. Which guides us into the next query. One that explores not into the sea, but into our own genetic code. Long before archaeology revealed stone bases under the seas, long before sonar followed overlooked shorelines across the continental ledges, the most lasting proof of prior societies was already within us. It resided quietly in the human genome, transported across generations like a communication encoded in a container drifting through time. And only lately have scholars started to comprehend what that communication might be. Human DNA is an immense repository of trial, mistake, endurance, and adjustment. Most genes adhere to foreseeable configurations shaped by weather, nourishment, illness, and relocation. But occasionally, scientists meet an irregularity, a genetic imprint that does not act like any common mutation. One of the oddest is a group of characteristics discovered in less than 0.5% of the worldwide population. Too uncommon to be arbitrary, too uniform to be chance, and too peculiar to fit neatly within the recognized branches of human lineage. This group surfaces across communities that should have no link, among specific upland groups of India, among secluded coastal clans of Southeast Asia, among indigenous Australians in the distant north, among the Basque individuals of Western Europe, and scattered lightly through a few populations that reside near the remnants of submerged societies. These communities share no recent past, no shared tongue, and no evident migratory connection. Yet the identical genetic indicators surface in all of them. The characteristics themselves are remarkable. Improved resistance to hypoxia, the capacity to operate with decreased oxygen amounts, unusual stamina under bodily stress, mild but quantifiable improvements in spatial mapping areas of the brain, the very areas that handle navigation, orientation, and geometric comprehension. What renders this even odder is that these characteristics do not surface as distinct adjustments. They surface collectively, packaged as if inherited from a common forebear. But it is the neurological element that attracts the most focus. Brain imaging research on people who bear this rare group display increased activity in regions linked with memory encoding and environmental identification. Not memory as in individual occurrences, but memory as an inherited pattern recognition, the instinctive capacity to position oneself in unknown landscapes, to track astronomical signals, to monitor seasonal alterations with unusual precision. These capacities do not ensure intelligence. They are nearer to a subdued intuition, an inner guide that directs not north or south, but towards something more ancient. Some anthropologists propose that these characteristics surfaced from antique populations residing in high elevation settings. Others propose that they originated from interbreeding with now extinct hominin groups. But these rationales stumble because the genetic group surfaces where elevation is irrelevant, where archaic hominins did not exist, and where environmental elements do not warrant such adjustments. Instead, the configuration aligns with something far more ancient and far more delicate. It aligns with the survivors, communities whose forebears escaped ascending seas or descending dust or abrupt gloom, communities whose verbal histories discuss journeys across submerged territories, of forsaken metropolises engulfed by liquid, of celestial wisdom transmitted without grasping its source, communities that bear shards of recollection from realms that no longer exist. The more scientists inspect the group, the more peculiar it becomes. One gene affects cellular restoration in a manner that resembles adjustments discovered in deep-diving mammals. Another modifies metabolic effectiveness during times of low sunlight. A third displays suggestions of ancient selective stress that does not match any recognized climate alteration of the last 50,000 years. All of this implies not only endurance, but endurance under extreme recurring and disastrous conditions. And then arrives the most disturbing observation of all. The group is becoming more dynamic. Epigenetic indicators on these sequences display indications of arousal, as if environmental circumstances are starting to resemble those that formed the original bearers. Ascending carbon dioxide amounts, shifting magnetic fields, altering climate cadences. It is almost as though the genome recollects something the aware mind does not. A caution engraved in biology, readying for a configuration that is recurring. If prior societies ascended and descended, if the world rebooted itself repeatedly, then it is logical that only the tiniest human community endured each downfall. Those who evaded were compelled to adjust rapidly, bearing the characteristics that permitted them to persist. Over tens of thousands of years, the bulk of these indicators faded. But a few endured, concealed deep within the genetic code, transmitted quietly from parent to offspring, awaiting the world to resemble the world that preceded. This does not confirm that antique societies were sophisticated, but it confirms something just as crucial, that humans today are not beginning from nothing. We bear reverberations of antique realms in our bones, in our blood, in our urges, the deluge legends, the myths, the odd architectural alignments, the lost metropolises under the ocean. These are not isolated enigmas. They are elements of a solitary narrative, a narrative so ancient it rewrote itself into the genome of the individuals who endured it. And now that we can interpret this code for the first time, the query is not whether prior societies existed. The query is what they were capable of constructing and why so many of their creations were wiped out. So thoroughly the terrain where we tread holds hints, not just fragmented shards or submerged remnants, but constructions so immense and so accurate they appear impossible for antique cultures to produce. Yet they endure silent and unmovable, directing toward a past we no longer comprehend. Ahead rests the inquiry of those giants in rock, the immense constructions that should not exist. For generations, the immense monuments of the antique world have been regarded as victories of early society. The pyramids of Egypt, the colossal stones of Peru, the vast geometric compounds of Mexico, the interred pyramid areas of China, the Cyclopean barriers scattered across Europe and Asia, all of them examined, appreciated, and continually reinterpreted. Yet, the more attentively we examine these constructions, the less they mimic the labor of cultures ascending from simplicity. Instead, they appear like the final enduring leftovers of a wisdom that did not commence with those societies, but concluded with them. What renders these constructions so bewildering is not merely their magnitude. Humankind has always been capable of aspiration. It is the accuracy that challenges rationale. Stone blocks weighing dozens or even hundreds of tons are sliced with precision that contemporary engineers find difficult to replicate. Faces align with astronomical indicators down to fractions of a degree. Angles match heavenly loops that were allegedly unknown at the time. And the deeper we dig the bases of these monuments, the more ancient the strata seem to be. Nowhere is this more obvious than at the Giza Plateau. Under the known limestone covering of the Great Pyramid rests a core far odder and far more ancient than the surface implies. The alignment to true north, the proportion of its measurements, the symmetry encoded in its inner passages, all suggest mathematical refinement that should not have existed in the period of its official building. Yet the pyramid endures not as an origin, but as a reverberation. A monument whose surface may be younger, but whose design murmurs of wisdom transported across a chasm of overlooked time. In South America, the narrative is comparable. At Sacsayhuaman, the giant stone barriers interlock like puzzle elements with no grout, no spaces, and no uniform block size. Each rock is distinct, formed to fit the next so accurately that even contemporary laser charting cannot entirely rationalize the technique employed. The more ancient strata rest under the Inca stonework, not above it. The Incas themselves asserted they did not construct the base. They inherited it. Across the sea, the pyramids of Teotihuacan disclose another irregularity. Their arrangement mirrors the orbital distances of planets in the solar system. The Pyramid of the Sun rests atop a cavern altered into an impeccable clover-formed chamber. The pathway linking the constructions aligns not with a solstice, but with the setting location of a particular star during a remote epoch. Whoever planned the metropolis designed it with wisdom of the heavens, far exceeding the requirements of an early farming community. In China, whole pyramid areas stay concealed under forested mounds, officially categorized as burial hills, but formed with geometric precision. Many are directed towards celestial occurrences no longer observable due to alterations in Earth's axial incline. And under several of these mounds, ground-penetrating examinations disclose chambers built of stone blocks, sliced with the same accuracy observed in colossal locations across the world. The resemblances are not superficial. They are structural, foundational, inherent. Regardless of position, period, or culture, the most ancient strata of the greatest monuments share the same traits: enormous rocks, interlocking connections, astronomical alignments, and an architectural approach that feels acquired rather than created. It is as though every culture that ascended after an immense downfall discovered shards of something more ancient and utilized those shards as patterns. They reconstructed what they could recollect. They mimicked what they did not comprehend, and what they produced became the monuments that perplexed us for centuries. If all of these constructions were merely the outcome of ingenuity, we would anticipate to discover a clear evolutionary route of building. Yet there is none. The most ancient constructions are the most accurate. The youngest often decrease in precision. Methods do not advance over time. They diminish. This reversal is not natural. Technology does not regress without reason. It regresses when wisdom is lost. Another hint rests in the placement of these monuments. Many endure along fault lines where tectonic flows concentrate. Others rest atop geological shapes rich in quartz, basalt, or magnetic minerals. Some aligned with worldwide grids that stay unexplained. It seems these antique builders were not merely producing sanctuaries or graves. They were building something operational, something energetic, something that interacted with the planet itself. Whether they functioned as observatories, resonators, power stations, or indicators of a more ancient world is unclear. But what is clear is that the cultures historians attribute with constructing these constructions did not hold the necessary instruments, methods, or wisdom, at least not according to the official narrative. Yet the monuments exist. The challenge always reverts to the same query. If prior societies constructed these bases, where did they depart? What power wiped out nearly everything except the rocks too heavy to demolish? The response may rest not in the remnants we can observe, but in the hints those remnants direct toward. Hints that imply Earth has not accommodated one society, but many, each ascending higher than the previous before vanishing into quietness. And if 6 realms preceded ours, abandoning only these fractured leftovers, then the next enigma becomes inevitable. What concluded each of them? And what does that signify for us now? Ahead rests the deeper exploration of those vanished cultures, the societies wiped out before, and the configurations concealed within their ascent and descent. If the monuments that still endure on the exterior of our world are reverberations of something more ancient, then the societies that constructed the originals must have ascended and descended long before documented history. Yet, unlike contemporary communities, which abandon metals, plastics, and digital phantoms, these prior realms appear only in transient geological imprints, shards of instruments, and recollections preserved through legend. Their contours are subtle, but when positioned together, they start to disclose a configuration far more intricate than the simple narrative of humankind ascending once from primitive sources. The first of these overlooked societies surfaces in what is now Southeast Asia during a period when the Sunda Shelf formed an immense landmass linking the islands of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. This area, now mostly underwater, holds proof of antique river networks, productive plains, and extended shorelines, ideal for early habitation. Geologists approximate that tens of millions of individuals could have resided there before ascending seas devoured the terrain. If this culture mastered farming and coastal engineering, their vanishing in a disastrous deluge would rationalize both the quietness in the archaeological archive and the deluge legends that originated across the surrounding landmasses. Another society appears to have prospered in what is now the Sahara Desert, back when it was a verdant expanse filled with lakes, streams, and thriving ecosystems. Antique rock illustrations from the area depict vessels, livestock, and human assemblies that resemble structured communities. And under the sands, radar scanning has disclosed geometric forms and interred constructions that suggest large habitations. This society may have been the connection linking early African, Mediterranean, and Mesopotamian cultures, a center of activity wiped out when the desert expanded and devoured everything in its route. Far to the north, the area between Siberia and Alaska, known as Beringia, provides yet another hint. During the last ice age, it was a moderate grassland, sustaining immense herds of megafauna and the human populations that pursued them. But what is seldom addressed is the magnitude of this landmass and its potential for early advancement. Beringia was not merely a relocation path. It was a homeland, a location where unique adjustments surfaced, perhaps even technologies adapted to cold climates and large animal control. When sea heights ascended, the whole area vanished under the Bering Strait. abandoning only scattered genetic suggestions among northern populations. In the Indus Valley, remnants like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa display indications of a sophisticated urban culture that appears to have materialized almost completely developed. Their grid arrangements, drainage frameworks, uniform brick dimensions, and standardized measures imply a society inheriting wisdom rather than creating it. And under the visible remnants lie more ancient strata, less comprehended, suggesting a pre-existing culture that may have transported forward customs from an even prior period. Across the Mediterranean, the islands of Crete, Cyprus, Sardinia, and Malta hold remnants so ancient and intricate they challenge placement on the accepted chronology. Some constructions feature stonework, reminiscent of locations thousands of miles distant, implying a maritime culture with far-reaching impact. Massive port installations suggest sophisticated navigation, trade systems, and possibly technologies that permitted them to control coastal settings. The downfall of these cultures coincides with sudden climate occurrences, volcanic blasts, and abrupt sea height alterations. The sixth and perhaps most mysterious society may have ascended within the Amazon basin. Under the dense cover, LiDAR scans disclose sprawling systems of roads, mounds, canals, and geometric earthworks extending for hundreds of miles. The magnitude implies not small hamlets, but a coordinated community capable of landscape engineering on an immense scale. If their wisdom revolved around biological frameworks, farming, or environmental balance, their downfall may be linked to climate alterations, illness, or drought, abandoning a jungle that engulfed their achievements. What links all six societies is not merely their vanishing, but the suddenness of their conclusions. They do not diminish gradually from history. They disappear in geological moments. Deluges, volcanic winters, abrupt freezes, megadroughts, cosmic collisions. The exact cause differs, but the timing stays eerily uniform with Earth's natural loops. Periods of steadiness lasting millennia conclude in instances of disorder that wipe out nearly everything. In each loop, the survivors disperse. They bear shards of wisdom with them, elements of tongue, recollection, and ability that reappear centuries later in cultures that appear far too sophisticated for their age. They reconstruct what they can. They mimic what they lost, and eventually a new society ascends in the remnants of the old, never grasping it is only the next section in a much more ancient narrative. If this understanding is accurate, then we are not the first to position at the elevation of development. We are simply the most recent. 6 times the world has advanced toward intricacy. 6 times it has been compelled to commence again. And now, as contemporary humankind positions on the boundary of unmatched worldwide alteration, the query grows increasingly tough to overlook. What concluded those realms? And why does the configuration seem to be recurring? Because if Earth truly functions on a loop of ascent and descent, then our own placement in that loop becomes the most crucial enigma of all. Ahead rests the inquiry of powers that may have wiped out those antique societies. Powers capable of sweeping away whole periods and abandoning only subtle remnants for us to uncover millennia later. As the contours of prior societies grow sharper, another configuration starts to surface. One that has nothing to do with geology or archaeology and everything to do with human conduct. It manifests in the way discoveries vanish, in the way establishments respond, and in the way certain elements of proof are quietly eliminated from public access. For every irregularity uncovered in rock or deposit, there appears to be an equal and opposite attempt to obscure it. Scholars who examine forbidden chronologies discuss a phenomenon they term the vanishing trail. A diver charts a submerged construction, but the pictures are seized before they can be released. A university group declares the uncovering of a location that predates known society, and within weeks funding is severed, access is limited, and the narrative is restructured as a misinterpretation. Museum repositories hold artifacts that were once exhibited openly, but now rest in unmarked compartments without inventory numbers or origin records. Even satellites sometimes scan over areas of interest only for the resulting information to disappear behind digital barriers. These events are often rejected as administrative errors, bureaucratic reorganization, or mere chance. But chances seldom form repeating configurations, and here the configuration is unmistakable. The more ancient the uncovering, the more accurate the craftsmanship, the more sophisticated the implied machinery, the quicker it vanishes from public sight. Why does this occur? There are several potentials, each disturbing in its own manner. One potential is institutional resistance. Whole academic domains are constructed upon the notion that society commenced recently. If proof surfaces that contradicts this, it endangers careers, theories, textbooks, and the basis of long-accepted narratives. It is simpler to enter anomalies than revise the narrative. Another potential is national concern. Submerged remnants often rest near strategic shorelines. Ancient constructions built on geological hotspots could have implications for energy inquiry, military machinery, or mineral exploration. Governments have a long past of classifying anything that might provide a competitive edge. But there is a third potential, one that aligns uncomfortably well with the worldwide uniformity of vanishing. It is the notion that the concealment is structured not to safeguard nations, but to safeguard steadiness itself. Because if the public discovered that 6 societies ascended before us, that each one attained a height akin to or surpassing our own, and that each one crumbled abruptly, the implications would be deep. It would signify our contemporary world is not unique. It would signify our technologies are not unmatched. It would signify we are susceptible to the same recurring powers that wiped out those prior periods. In this perspective, the concealment is not malevolent. It is precautionary. Those in authority may believe they are protecting society from alarm, safeguarding economies from downfall, and purchasing time until humankind is ready to confront the reality of its placement in the loop. Such a viewpoint, while paternalistic, is not impossible. History is filled with instances of elites selecting quietness over disclosure. If such groups exist, whether formal assemblies, loose systems of scholars, or concealed committees within governments, their impact surfaces in the same locations: limited access to remnants, classified satellite information, abrupt closures of archaeological locations, research documents withdrawn without rationale, funding redirected away from anything that endangers the accepted chronology. The configuration is worldwide, not confined to any country or political belief. And the oddest part is this: the concealment often commences before an uncovering can even be examined. It is as though someone somewhere identifies the importance far quicker than any academic committee could. Sonar scans marked before divers arrive at the liquid. Excavation authorizations denied before soil is disturbed. Digital archives erased minutes after irregularities surface in public repositories. Such effectiveness implies readiness, a standing procedure awaiting activation. This prompts a deeper query. If these prior societies did exist, if their remnants rest under the seas and their recollections endure only in scattered legends, who else has known this? Did the survivors of the last loop caution their offspring? Did leftovers of their wisdom pass secretly through religious orders, associations, or esoteric communities? Is the contemporary concealment not the commencement of hiding, but the continuation of a custom millennia ancient? These are perilous notions, but they align with the uniformity of the quietness. If someone has spent generations safeguarding humankind from the truth of its past, then perhaps they believe the past holds not just wisdom, but peril. Something potent enough to wipe out whole realms. Something we may be nearing again because the ultimate configuration, the one that renders all the others significant, is the recurrence of downfall. Every previous society seems to have concluded abruptly. Every loop aligns with geological turmoil. And as we inspect our own period, the same indicators start to surface once more. If wisdom of these loops has been concealed, then the last query to pose is the most crucial one of all. What does the past indicate about our future? Ahead rests the final progression in this voyage, the arrival of the next loop, and the indications that it may already be developing. If the remnants of 6 overlooked realms rest scattered under our feet, and if the 7th is the one we now term modern humankind, then every hint gathered along this inquiry directs toward a single unavoidable conclusion. We are not at the commencement of our narrative. We are positioned at the threshold of its next section. The 8th Society is not something awaiting in the remote future. It is something already shaping in the fissures of the present. Earth does not alter abruptly without caution. It provides indications subtle at first, then unmistakable for those who have learned to interpret them. Alterations in magnetic configurations, sudden climate fluctuations, ascending seas, the weakening of long, steady flows in the atmosphere and the ocean. These shifts mirror the same indicators that preceded prior downfalls, and they are occurring again in our lifetime, not on the scale of centuries, but on the scale of decades. Carbon dioxide amounts now surpass anything observed throughout the known history of humankind. Storms increase in frequency and intensity. Ice sheets break at accelerated speeds. Whole ecosystems alter their ranges in a single human generation. These alterations are presented as environmental concerns, scientific representations, or political discussions. But viewed in the context of the long overlooked loops, they surface instead as something more ancient and more recurring, the commencement of another immense turning. If prior societies were demolished by deluges, dust, chill, or warmth, then our own period bears reverberations of all of these threats simultaneously. Ocean heights creep upward toward the shorelines where most of humankind now resides. Volcanic areas display renewed activity. The magnetic field continues to shift and diminish. Heat waves shatter records year after year. The indications do not ensure disaster, but they mirror the configurations of prior downfalls with disturbing precision. Yet even as the world inclines toward instability, something else moves. A counterforce, ascending not in nature, but in humankind itself. The rare genetic group born by scattered populations across the globe, the odd inheritance of survivors from prior loops, is arousing. Epigenetic research discloses increased activity in metabolic routes once linked to stamina under extreme climatic pressure. Neurological indicators associated with spatial recollection and environmental consciousness display heightened growth in younger generations. It is as though the offspring of the ancient survivors sense the loop recurring through urges deeper than aware thought. At the same time, technologies are surfacing that resemble shadows of the lost periods, not in shape, but in operation. We rediscover solar power just as prior societies appear to have harnessed the sun. We explore biological computing, echoing the Amazonian earthworks that once formed whole ecosystems. We unlock the power of artificial intelligence, perhaps mirroring the overlooked mechanisms suggested in the geologic archive and the enduring legends of self-operating devices. It is possible that innovation in each period is not creation, but recollection resurfacing. Metropolises ascend higher. Systems grow denser. Information streams freely across land masses. Humankind reorganizes itself into something more interconnected than ever before. These developments are often structured as advancement. Yet they may also be symptoms of a species unconsciously readying for a new loop. Each society ascends swiftly near its conclusion, as though propelled by powers it does not comprehend, driven to attain some threshold before the turning arrives. But the most deep query is not whether the 8th Society will ascend. It is whether it will endure. Every previous loop concluded abruptly. Wisdom dispersed, metropolises submerged, landscapes revised. Only shards endured through the survivors who bore recollection in their blood and narratives. Our loop may not be different unless our reaction is different. We hold something none of the prior societies had, the capacity to observe the configuration, to gaze back across geological time, to inspect the leftovers of prior realms, to comprehend that downfall is not arbitrary, but rhythmic, and to prepare not with alarm, but with consciousness. The Eighth Society could be the first to shatter the configuration, the first to foresee the turning, the first to safeguard its wisdom rather than lose it, the first to construct with the comprehension that nothing on earth is permanent except alteration itself. But for that to occur, humankind must confront its true chronology. It must comprehend that it positions atop the remnants of many realms, inheriting both the victories and the errors of those overlooked periods. It must advance with humility, curiosity, and the readiness to revise everything we thought we knew. If we succeed, the Eighth Society may ascend into a period unlike any before. If we fail, we will become another silent stratum in the earth, another murmur in legend, another lost realm awaiting rediscovery thousands of years from now. The loop is recurring. The indications are here. And the future will be shaped not by those who reject the past, but by those who venture to observe it clearly. If this voyage into our overlooked past has echoed with you, consider remaining with us as we seek what arrives next. A like, a share, or a subscription assists this narrative reach those who may also be searching for responses in the gloom. Thank you for journeying with us through the reverberations of lost realms. Until the next evening, rest well.